Okay, hi, I'm Pete Rogers, MD. This is just a quick summary of my life as it relates to this YouTube channel. I hope this will be helpful to you. See if you care. I was a real good high school wrestler. Junior year, I was 39-1, but I knew I was way better than that because I hadn't had any coaching yet. I knew as soon as I learned a little technique, I would get even better. I lost by 1 point in overtime. I got injured in the spring of my junior year, had a fracture through a growth plate. Every time I tried to come back, I refractured it, and it was real frustrating. So the Big Ten schools lost interest in me for a full scholarship, but Stanford still offered me a scholarship, and I wanted to go there because the Schultz brothers were now going to be the assistant coaches. They were national champions at that time, and Dave was really the best technical wrestler in the whole United States, and he's really a hero to me. Dave, when he was young, he had dyslexia and he was a fat kid, and he got picked on by the other kids, but he learned how to wrestle, and he actually became the best high school wrestler in the history of the United States. He defeated the two-time national champion Chuck Yagler from Iowa, caught him in a throw and pinned him in national opens. Mark Schultz was such a great athlete. I almost felt like, what could I learn from him? He just does stuff because he's a great athlete. I don't got that type of ability. But I learned a ton from him about mental psychology of wrestling. They both are featured in the Foxcatcher movie, and there's several versions of it. They're both world and Olympic champions. But like, what could you learn from this experience? I should have talked to those guys my freshman year, gone up to them and begged them to teach me. But I was scared of them my first couple years. But once I started talking to them, I got a lot better. I ended up being Stanford Student Athlete of the Year. I set the school record for most wins in a season at 39. But if I'd have talked to him sooner, I should have been All-American. I just came one match away from being All-American. It's one of the biggest regrets of my life. I was sort of like an Alfred Adler inferiority complex. I was screwed up my wrestling career, so I was trying to make up for it by becoming a great student. One of the valuable things I got out of Stanford was I learned how to study. Starting out, I was a wrestler. My parents were both foreigners. They didn't know anything about the United States. I never took honors class. I didn't even know what an AP class was. So I get to Stanford, there's all these kids that have been to these East Coast prep schools, and they've already finished the first year with AP classes and stuff. But I learned that the real secret of becoming a great student is to learn good study skills and also have an intense sense of purpose. The kind of people who did really well over there were kids that loved learning, or kids that saw it as their whole goal in life to get good in school. The ones that were all really popular and social, they didn't do so well because you have to be pretty devoted to studying. And the big secret too is learn study skills. All these kids nowadays, they go to college, they pay all this money, and they go through all these weed out classes, but they don't know how to study. I know study skills make a giant difference. They're like worth about 40 IQ points, academic IQ points. I say that because my first year I was always afraid I was going to flunk out of school. But by my second year, I would walk in the class, science class, I didn't care. I got A+s organic chemistry and biology. I knew I was probably going to get the highest grade in the class. I was so confident because I knew how to study. There's a big difference. Med school, I graduated, won the award as the best student in the class with 99% board scores. I wrote a book about it. The dean for the University of Illinois Medical School wrote the foreword. This is a medical student's guide to top board scores. I wrote a quick medical Spanish book back then. It's actually not one of my best books. The next edition, I sold that to Little Brown, was a lot better. This was a more advanced book on study skills, straight A at Stanford and on to Harvard. I continued to study skills until after I had my own kids, trying to learn how one optimizes cognitive development. I wrote a book on how to raise IQ and become a genius. The reality is a person can really improve their academic performance. They can improve their IQ. All the stuff that says you can't improve IQ, it's not true. The key though is that you want to improve it and be like Dave Schultz. Dave Schultz wasn't just a little bit better than the guys he wrestled. He was like 100 times better. Let me explain. If you look at a curve of physical strength, endurance, you can only get a little bit better than somebody. But what Dave Schultz found is that you can be 100 times better than other people in technique. And actually cognitively, some people read literally about 100 times as much as other persons. You can really do all kinds of things to optimize cognitive performance. The ability to improve cognitive performance is way beyond what is widely recognized. And the secret is to be like Dave Schultz. That's what I learned from him. Incremental improvement in every aspect of your day. And we'll talk about that in other lectures, but it's really possible. I see it all the time and I know how to do it. I interviewed all the top 10% students in the medical schools. The dean gave me permission to do that. And I found out the behavior and psychology of the top 10% students totally different than the kids that were in the middle or the kids that were in the bottom quarter of the medical school classes. I also tutored the kids in the bottom quarter of the medical school class. All right. Next thing, residency. I learned the residency stuff so fast after my second year I stopped going to conference, and I actually got in trouble for that. They didn't let me be chief resident because I didn't care. I traded all my time at the rich hospital, went to the poor hospital because I could function independently like an attending. I was doing unassisted cerebral angiograms as a third-year resident. And so I learned a lot that's sort of interesting. Did fellowship imaging guided surgery, interventional radiology at Harvard. I learned a lot from that experience. I really liked Boston. I also went on and did another fellowship in neuroradiology of the brain. I started out the first 6 months trying to do imaging guided brain surgery as well, endovascular interventional radiology, but I gave that up because neurosurgery's taken it over. I did tons of spine procedures though, and I became fascinated by correlating the neuroanatomy and function of the brain with these other aspects, physiology and my interest in optimizing cognitive performance. But it was a difficult year for me in the sense that I was doing 2 fellowships simultaneously, had a new baby at home with the wife, and I got fat. I couldn't believe it. How could this happen to me? But I was fat, and then I figured, well, I'll just lose the weight, exercise more and eat less. But that doesn't work. I tried that for 3 years. I couldn't believe it. I got great willpower. I couldn't do it. And then I realized, oh my God, I started getting made fun of by my family. And I was like, holy crap, I'm going to become a fat diabetic and be impotent and have all these problems. That's embarrassing. That should not happen. So I devoted my life at that point, made it my #1 priority. I read everything on nutrition, went back to all the biochemistry books. When I was in medical school, I had gotten like the highest score in the United States on the biochemistry boards, not just at my medical school, in the whole United States. And I loved biochemistry at that time. I'm like, that's the language of life, okay? So anyways, what happened is I realized I had understood how to memorize reactions for a test, but I hadn't really understood regulation and correlation with biochemistry with disease. So I went back to it with a new mindset. And I also noticed it became very useful to correlate that with diseases and pathophysiology. And it's a key thing. If you want to cure a disease, you want to understand the disease. Because the way you cure a disease is you remove the cause of the disease. And you have to know what the cause is. Quite often, the cause will not be known. Like you'll say hypertension, all right? But then when you start reading about, well, hypertension's association with sodium intake, hypertension's association with saturated fat intake, hypertension's association with fructose intake, that's very useful information. You avoid those things. So anyways, after that I became real fascinated by the correlations between nutrition, biochemistry, radiology, imaging, CAT scans, MRIs, and also pathophysiology, disease causation. And I wrote a bunch of books on that. This is, I think, probably my best book is How to Reduce Risk of Chronic Disease. And I really went through a lot of interesting concepts. I came up with a theory basically on how back pain works. I came up with a theory of neurodegeneration and why brains shrink. Talk about that in some other lectures. Back when I was in a fellowship, I wrote a textbook of imaging-guided procedures, interventional radiology. What's the latest thing? My latest book, Hot Topics in Clinical Nutrition and Correlation with Disease. This is a fun book, A Tale of Two Toes in a Tub. It's more of this type of, basically pretty much all my nutrition books are correlating, trying to understand how nutrition causes disease and what you need to do to get better. And the great news that came out of this is most chronic disease patients, they're basically hopeless. They don't do well. They just crash and burn. And sometimes it's like this, sometimes it's like this. And the point is, if they actually get their act together, there's things that can be done. A lot of them can actually be cured or at least dramatically improved. So that was pretty wonderful to learn that. And I went through the experience of my parents being sick. I learned a lot from that. Did the best I could to help them. I wish I knew as much then as I did now. That was many years ago. Here's one of my books for neuroradiology boards exam. And the reason I show this is just some of these pictures is I would just tape in all my other pictures into one location, into this book as my framework. And that way I'd have everything in one spot. That really helps a lot for school. This was my outline format book, condensed notes. You can see I had to help tape the whole thing together. It was falling apart. I got a perfect score on my diagnostic radiology written boards. I was done like an hour and 10 minutes, a 4.5 hour test. And this is how I was able to do it, by having all the information in one spot. At the beginning of the residency, the senior residents, these are all like top 10, 15% of their class students said, read these books and you'll do fine on your boards. I said, bullshit. I didn't pay any attention to it. What I did was, I would just intensely study whatever happened that day because I was emotionally connected to it. And then I would read about it in great detail and anything I heard in conference. And then I would, and the point I'm trying to say is by paying attention to what you see during the day, you're emotionally connected to it. So that gives you good retention. Versus if you try to read a book cover to cover, you get bored. You know, Oscar Wilde had said the only person who's interested in all forms of art is an auctioneer. So anyways, then I did a whole bunch of things in mnemonics, and I write about all these different study skill stuff in my other books. So anyways, that's sort of my background. Hope that's helpful.